The noise of the banged door still rang in my ears, but, as would have been more usual, if this had been mere nightmare, the terror would have been mine when I saw those foul beasts crawling about the bed or dropping softly to the floor. It did not cease then. Awake now, as if dreaming before, I did not recover from the horror of the dream. It did not seem to me that I had dreamed, and until dawn I sat or stood, not dare to lie down, thinking that every rustle or movement that I heard was the approach of the caterpillars. To them, in the claws that bit into the cement of the wood, the door was child's play. Steel would not keep them out. But with the sweet and noble return of the day, the horror vanished. The whisper of wind became benignant again. The nameless fear, whatever it was smoothed out and terrified me no longer. Dawn broke, hueless at first. Then it grew dove-colored, then the flaming pageant of light spread over the sky. The admirable rule of the house was that everybody had breakfast where and when they pleased, and in my consequence it was not till lunchtime that I met any of the other members of our party, since I had breakfast on my balcony and wrote letters and other things till lunch. In fact, I got down to that meal rather late, after the other three had begun. Between my knife and fork there was a small pillbox of cardboard, and as I sat down the English spoke. Do look at that," he said. "Since you are interested in natural history, I found it crawling on my counterpane last night, and I don't know what it is." I think that before I opened the pillbox I expected something of the sort which I found in it. Inside, anyhow, was a small caterpillar, grayish-yellow in color, with curious bumps and excrescences on its rings. It was extremely active, and hurried round the box, this way and that. Its feet were unlike the rest of any caterpillar I had ever seen. They were like the pincers of a crab. I looked, and shut the lid down again. "No, I don't know," I said, "but it looks rather unwholesome. What are you going to do with it?" "Oh, I shall keep it," said Inglis. "It has begun to spin. I want to see what sort of a moth it turns into." I opened the box again, and saw these hurrying movements were indeed the beginning of the spinning of the web of its cocoon. Then Inglis spoke again. "It has got funny feet, too," he said. "They're like crabs' pincers. What is Latin for crab?" "Oh, yes, cancer. So in case it is unique, let's christen it. Cancer inglissensis. Cancer inglissensis." Then something happened in my brain, some momentary piecing together of all that I had seen or dreamed. Something in his words seemed to throw light on it all, and my own intense horror of the experience of the night before linked itself on to what he had just said. In effect, I took the box and threw it, caterpillar and all, out the window. There was a gravel path just outside, and beyond it a fountain playing into a basin. The box fell on in the middle of this. Inglis laughed. "So the students of the occult don't like solid facts," he said. "My poor caterpillar!" The talk went off again at once on to other subjects, and I have only given in detail as they happened these trivialities in order to be sure myself that I have recorded everything that could have been born on occult subjects or on the subject of caterpillars. But at the moment when I threw the pillbox into the fountain, I lost my head. My only excuse is that, as is probably plain, the tenant of it was, in miniature, exactly what I had seen crowded onto the bed in this unoccupied room. And though this translation of those phantoms into flesh and blood, or whatever it is that caterpillars are made of, ought perhaps to have relieved the horror of the night, as a matter of fact it did nothing of the kind. It only made the crawling pyramid that covered the bed in the unoccupied room more hideously real. After lunch we spent a lazy hour or so strolling around the garden or sitting in the loggia, and it must have been about 4 o'clock when Stanley and I started off to bathe down the path that led into the fountain which I had thrown the pillbox. The water was shallow and clear, and at the bottom of it I saw its white remains. The water had disintegrated the cardboard, and it had become no more than a few strips and shreds of sodden paper. The center of the fountain was a modern Italian Cupid, which squirted the water out of a wineskin held under its arm, and crawling up to its leg was the caterpillar. Strange and scarcely credible as it seemed, it must have survived the falling to bits of its prison, and made its way to shore, and there it was, out of arm's reach, weaving and waving this way and that as it evolved its cocoon. Then, as I looked at it, it seemed to me that, again, like the caterpillar I had seen last night, it saw me, and breaking out of the threads that surrounded it, it crawled around the marble leg of the Cupid and began swimming like a snake across the water of the fountain towards me. It came with extraordinary speed. The fact of a caterpillar being able to swim was new to me, and in another moment was crawling up the marble lip of the basement. Just then Inglis joined us. "Why, if it isn't old Cancer inglissensis again," he said, catching sight of the beast. "What a tearing hurry it is in." We were standing side by side on the path, and when the caterpillar had advanced to about within a yard of us, it stopped, and began waving again as if in doubt of the direction it should go. Then it appeared to make up its mind and crawled onto Inglis's shoe. "It likes me best," he said, "but I don't really know that I like it. And as it won't drown, I think perhaps—" He took it off his shoe to the graveled path and trod on it. All afternoon the air got heavier and heavier with the sirocco that was without a doubt coming from the south. And that night I went to bed feeling very sleepy, but below my drowsiness, so to speak, there was the consciousness, stronger than before, that there was something wrong in that house, that something dangerous was close at hand. But I fell asleep at once, and how long after I do not know, either woke or dreamed I awoke, feeling that I must get up at once or I should be too late. Then, dreaming or awake, I lay and fought this fear, telling myself that one was but the prey of my own nerves disordered by sirocco or what not, and at the same time quite clearly knowing in another part of my mind, so to speak, that every moment's delay added to my danger. At this second feeling became irresistible, and I put on coat and trousers and went out of my room to the landing, and I saw that I had already delayed too long, and that it was now too late. The whole of the landing of the first floor below was invisible under the swarm of caterpillars that crawled there. The folding doors into the sitting room from which I opened the bedroom, I hadn't seen them last night, were shut, but they were squeezing through the cracks of it and dropping one by one through the keyhole, elongating themselves into mere strings as they passed, and growing fat and lumpy again on emerging. Some, as if exploring, were nosing about the steps into the passage at the end, which were Inglis's rooms. Others were crawling on the lowest steps of the staircase that led up to where I stood. The landing, however, was completely covered with them. I was cut off. And of the frozen horror that seized me when I saw that, I can give no idea in words. Then at last a general movement began to take place, and they grew thicker on the steps that led to Inglis's room. Gradually, like some hideous tide of flesh, they advanced along the passage, and I saw the foremost visible by the pale gray luminousness that came from them, reaching his door again. Again and again I tried to shout and warn him in terror all the time that they would turn at the sound of my voice and mount my stair instead, but for all the efforts I felt that no sound came from my throat. They crawled around the huge crack of this door, passing through as if they had done before, and as I stood there making impotent efforts to shout to him, to bid him escape while there was time. At last the passage was completely empty. They had all gone, and at that moment I was conscious for the first time of the cold of the marble landing which I stood barefooted. The dawn was just beginning to break in the eastern sky. 6 months later, after I met Stanley in a country house in England, we talked on many subjects, and at last she said, "I don't think I have seen you since I got that dreadful news about Arthur Inglis a month ago." "I haven't heard it," said I. "No, he has got cancer. They don't even advise an operation, for there is no hope of a cure. He is riddled with it, the doctors say." Now, during these months, I do not think a day had passed in which they had not in my mind the dreams, or whatever it is you like to call them, which had seen the Villa Cascana. "It is awful, is it not?" she continued. "And I feel that I can't help feeling that he may have—" "Caught it at the villa?" I asked. She looked at me in blank surprise. "Why did you say that?" she asked. "How did you know?" Then she told me. In the unoccupied bedroom a year before there had been a fatal case of cancer. She had, of course, taken the best advice and been told that the utmost dictates of her prudence would be obeyed so long as she did not put anybody to sleep in the room, which had also been thoroughly disinfected and newly whitewashed and painted. But